So now I've introduced the leg subassembly 6 times into this main assembly and made the connections back to the core, then we're pretty well on the way with our hexapod design. So you can see I've got 6 repeats of that leg subassembly. Each one has got this chain link icon next to it which shows it's a reference part from elsewhere, so I can't actually modify that part inside this assembly. If I do need to make a change, I do need to go back to that source file. But that part brings in all of the normal joint information, so this creates this properly articulating hexapod leg joined back to this main assembly. So what I want to do now is introduce an electronic control board to be able to control this hexapod, and in the data panel I've found an Arduino board from an external source and I've uploaded that into the data panel, and that I can now just drag and drop into the workspace in exactly the same way that we've done before. I'm just going to lift that up out the way because what I'm going to do now is create a joint. I'm going to create the joint between the center of that top plate and the center of the underside of the Arduino board, and it's going to be a rigid joint because the two are going to be screwed together. So that gives me the Arduino board now in this assembly, and it gives me some reference to be able to work to make sure the cover that I put on over the top of this will actually fit and not interfere with the Arduino board. So we're now going to create the cover. I've already created a component in the browser, so I've done create new component and created a cover, so I'm going to activate that. And what we're going to do to create that cover is look at a number of different ways that we can create a cover. And what we're going to do is use some tools in the create menu that we've not yet used. So we've used extrude a lot, but we've not yet used revolve, sweep and loft. So we're going to use those 3 tools now to look at some options to create a cover. So the first one is I've created this sketch profile. So this is 2 straight lines, and this curved line here connecting them is called a spline. So that's underneath the sketch menu. It's a great way of creating really nice curvature lines in your sketches, and that's given me this profile which I'm now going to revolve. So I'm going to create, revolve, pick on that profile, and I've got 2 options now. I need to select an axis to rotate that profile around. Now I could pick that particular axis, which will give me one particular way of revolving that particular profile. It's not the one we actually want, but you can see I've got a second axis in this particular sketch I could rotate it around. It's actually the vertical axis that we want, and when I click on that you should see that we've got this really nice shape, and you can see that what it's done is it's taken that shape and revolved it around a full 360 degrees, and that's the shape that we end up with. So that maybe is quite an elegant sort of shape to use, but maybe not the one that we want to use. So we've got another option. I'm going to now use something under the create menu called Loft, and what Loft does is transition these 3 shapes together to create an overall shape. So I've got a hexagon, I've got a circle, and I've got an ellipse, and they're all drawn on different planes. Now if you need to create a plane in mid-air like I've had to do here to create these sketches, under the construct menu you can create this thing called offset plane. If I click on that plane there, I can now lift a plane above that by 60 millimeters. So that's how you create an offset plane. So I've done that a couple of times there to create these 2 planes, and then sketches on those planes are actually hovering over the base plate. So I can now use the Loft tool under create, and I can click on this hexagon and transition that into that circle, and then transition that circle into that ellipse. So that gives me a shape transition between those 3 sketches. So that's what Loft does. Once I've created that, I can play around with some of the options. I can change things like the direction of the loft. I can add some guide rails to help it drive it in a certain direction. This takeoff weight, if I change that to 3, then you can see that changes the shape. If I change it to 5, then you'll see it change the shape again. So there's lots of options under Loft to adjust the way the parts actually transition, but if I'm happy with that I can accept that, and that's given me a cover design now for my hexapod. I'm now going to use the final tool that we've not yet seen, which is sweep. So I've got a profile here that is actually an ellipse with some chunks taken out of it, and that sketch has been designed in connection to the sketch that I created, the ellipse for this loft. Because what sweep allows you to do is, when I click on the sweep tool, it allows me to select that profile and then choose a path to drive it along. And in this case it can be an edge or it can be a sketch profile, doesn't really matter, both of them work. And if I click on that path, you'll see it's doing a cut command because it's cutting through that particular shape that's underneath it. Maybe I want that to be a join rather than a cut. So what that's done is now taken that particular profile and driven it around that particular ellipse. So I can grab this arrow and I can show you what it's doing, because basically it's just taking that profile and dragging it in a full 360 degrees around. You don't have to have it the full 360, you could stop it short if you wanted to, but by default it's going to do the whole path. So that's the sweep command. So it takes a profile and sweeps it along a path. So they're tools under the create menu that we've not seen before, but you've now seen extrude, revolve, sweep and loft, which are the 4 primary ways of actually making 3D geometry.